At my brother's wedding, my father humiliated me in front of 200 guests. I was the best man. I planned every detail. But when he told me to stay out of the way, something inside me snapped. Later that night, in front of everyone, he raised his hand, ready to strike. That moment shattered our family and cracked open a secret that had been buried for decades. I'm Elias Carter, and this is how the truth finally exploded. The sun hung low over the Colorado mountains as I stood near the edge of the crowd, my hands buried deep in the pockets of my gray slacks. The ceremony was already underway, rows of white chairs perfectly aligned on the lawn outside the Hillcrest Lodge in Boulder. Guests murmured silently, the string quartet playing a carefully chosen love song. I stood behind the last row, pretending to be busy adjusting the boutonniere pinned to my jacket. I wasn't supposed to be in the background. Technically, I was the best man. I'd helped organize the whole thing. The catering, the schedule, the floral arrangements, even the seating chart. Nathan hadn't lifted a finger, but he was the one in the spotlight, standing up there in his tailored navy suit, grinning like a man who had never known rejection. A hand clapped against my shoulder, firm, too familiar. Robert, my father. His voice dropped low the way it always did when he was about to say something for my ears only, even though he never cared who else heard. Just stay back here, Elias. No need to make things awkward. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just adjusted his tie and walked off toward the front, taking his place beside Harriet, my stepmother, who had been playing the role of perfect hostess all weekend. I swallowed, blinking fast. The smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint tang of champagne and perfume. All of it felt cloying, tight around the collar. I rubbed the back of my neck. Beside me, Lily reached for my hand. Her fingers were warm, grounding. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. "You have just as much right to be here as he does." I didn't answer. I just squeezed her hand. From the distance, I could see Caleb, too, standing on the other side of the lawn. He met my eyes, gave the faintest nod. He knew. He had always known how things were between me and my father. The music swelled. The bridal party began to line up. I caught a glimpse of Nathan looking back toward the crowd. Our eyes met for half a second. No smile, no acknowledgement. He turned back around. "Funny. You spend your whole life hoping your family will see you. And then one day you realize they've been looking past you the entire time." I adjusted my jacket, straightened my spine. When the music shifted and the officiant called everyone to rise, I took a step forward, not toward the front where my brother stood, but closer to the middle of the gathering. I stayed on the edge, invisible but not absent. Guests around me whispered compliments about the bride, the weather, the flowers. A woman I didn't recognize commented on how smooth everything had gone. I heard her say Nathan must have planned it all so perfectly. I nearly laughed. Harriet turned to glance back, eyes narrowing when she saw me there. She whispered something to Robert. He turned. His gaze landed on me like a slap. "You were supposed to stay out of the way, Elias," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. A few guests turned their heads. The moment hung in the air like a frozen breath. "Just try not to ruin your brother's big day, that was it. No thank you, no recognition, just more of the same." Lily's grip on my hand tightened. Caleb from across the lawn had taken a small step in my direction, his brow furrowed. I stared straight ahead. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, not from rage, but something deeper. A resignation, and beneath it something old and sharp beginning to stir again. I let go of Lily's hand and stepped forward, not into the aisle, not toward Nathan, but toward the space I had helped build. The arch I had chosen, the walkway I had arranged, the people I had seated. I took my place not as an accessory, but as a man reclaiming his ground. And I waited. The memory of rehearsal the day before drifted in clearer now under the soft wash of ceremony music. The way Nathan strolled in 15 minutes late, cracking jokes while everyone laughed like they had missed him. The way Harriet placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and called him her miracle. All while I was double-checking the layout, coordinating with the photographer, making sure the florist delivered the correct flowers. Nobody noticed, or they did and chose not to care. During the walkthrough, I handed out the program, smoothed the runner down the aisle, and kept my eyes on the schedule. But whispers floated around me, small, intentional. Someone murmured that Nathan looked every bit the star of the show. Someone else asked if I was just part of the catering team. I smiled through it. Nathan didn't thank me. He didn't have to. Everyone treated me like I should be grateful to be involved at all, like it was some kind of favor. Later, while the bridal party rehearsed their entrances, I was checking the timing on my clipboard when I felt a nudge. Dylan, one of Nathan's college buddies, grinned. "You're taking this seriously, huh? Bet it's tough playing backup at your own brother's big day." I gave a non-committal laugh. Dylan slapped me on the back and walked off. Even Lily seemed hesitant to meet my eyes afterward. I stepped into the bathroom, just needing a breath. The mirror above the sink reflected tired eyes and a mouth pulled tight. I ran cold water over my hands, letting it drip off slowly. The door creaked open behind me and I stiffened. It was just the janitor. He nodded once and went about replacing paper towels. I leaned against the sink, trying to breathe. My phone buzzed. A text notification lit up the screen. It was from one of the firms I'd pitched to the week before, a company I had hoped to contract with. I opened it. "Hi, Elias. After careful review, we've decided to go in a different direction. Best of luck." No explanation, no feedback, just rejection. Again, the weight of it pressed down hard, not just the text, but everything. My father's dismissal, Nathan's indifference, the constant feeling of being too much and never enough all at once. I looked into the mirror again. Water still clung to my hands. My reflection stared back, silent, questioning. Was I really meant for more than this? I stayed there longer than I should have. Long enough for someone to knock and ask if everything was okay. I muttered something and splashed more water on my face. Back outside, people milled around. Rehearsal was ending. Harriet gave instructions like a director on a film set. Robert stood beside her, arms crossed, nodding at Nathan, who had one arm wrapped lazily around his bride-to-be Reagan. She was beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Graceful, charming, camera-ready. But I didn't know her well. She and Nathan had met at a political fundraiser in D.C., and 3 months later they were engaged. It felt fast, performative. But maybe that was just me. I kept moving, helping the caterers load trays, confirming final times with the photographer, reviewing the guest list. It was easier to stay in motion than to think. Near the bar, a cluster of groomsmen laughed loudly. I caught my name in the mix. "Why is Elias always hovering around?" one said. "Maybe he's hoping someone mistakes him for the groom," another added. They chuckled. I didn't react. I just walked past them, clipboard in hand, pretending to check off an item. Lily found me near the kitchen entrance. "You okay?" she asked. "You were gone for a while." I nodded. Just needed air. She studied me for a beat, then touched my arm. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "Don't I?" I said, quieter than I meant. Before she could respond, Caleb joined us. He held a small tablet and looked mildly frustrated. "That timeline email you sent last night, the one confirming vendor arrival time, someone forwarded it to the wrong florist. They almost skipped tomorrow." I blinked. I never sent that to the florist directly. It must have gone through Dad's account when I copied him. "You sure he didn't make edits positive?" I checked twice. Caleb raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Another little thing, a little crack in the foundation. The day wound down. The rehearsal ended with polite applause, forced laughter, last-minute reminders. Nathan thanked the staff and waved at the crowd, playing the gracious host, no mention of me. As the sun dipped below the ridge, painting everything gold, I wandered back to the lodge bathroom again. I didn't need to pee. I just needed a mirror. I stood there facing my reflection like I was bracing for a fight. Maybe that's what I'd been doing all along, preparing for a battle no one else believed in. Standing in a ring they pretended didn't exist. I wanted to shout, to ask why, to demand something I knew I would never get. Instead, I just stared, and for the first time in years I whispered out loud, "Maybe I do deserve more than this." 3 months earlier, I had sat across from Logan Myers, the CEO of Hawthorne Development, inside his corner office in downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, the kind of view meant to make you feel small and impressed all at once. Logan had that polished, effortless authority people listened to, and I had come prepared. Pitch deck clean, proposal sharp, every slide practiced until I could deliver it in my sleep. But from the moment I walked in, I could feel it. The chill in the room, the slight hesitation before he shook my hand. He skimmed through my first few slides with a bored nod, interjected politely at the right moments, but never really looked at me. When I finished, he gave a tight smile. "Elias, it's a strong concept, I won't lie. But," he leaned back in his chair, "but there's some background noise around your name. Family stuff. Headlines. I need to protect the brand." My stomach dropped. It was the articles, the write-ups from 2 years ago when Robert Carter made headlines over a scandal in his own firm. Nothing directly tied to me, but the name was enough. The Carter name carried weight, and sometimes that weight crushed. I tried to reason, to redirect. I highlighted how my business model was entirely separate, independent. I wasn't my father. I never had been. Logan nodded like he sympathized, but his eyes stayed cold. "It's not personal, just business." I had walked out of that office burning, rage, shame, hopelessness. Now standing in the lodge bathroom, those words came back in full force. It's not personal, just business. But it had always been personal. Every time I tried to build something, the shadow of my father reached in and pulled it down. My phone buzzed again. I flinched. A new message lit up the screen. From Robert. "Don't cause problems tomorrow." 5 words. That was it. No greeting, no context. "Don't cause problems tomorrow." It echoed in my head like a threat, or maybe a dare. I stared at the text until the screen went dark. It wasn't just the rejection from Logan, it was the accumulation of being told in 100 different ways that I was less, that I was inconvenient, that I should stay quiet. The face in the mirror hadn't changed since rehearsal. Same tired eyes, same clenched jaw, but something underneath had shifted. The buzzing in my head turned into a whisper. "You have to prove something, not to them, to yourself." I straightened up, reached for my tie, adjusted the knot, smoothed the lapels of my jacket. The image looking back at me was sharper now, more certain. I took a deep breath and left the bathroom, walking back into the corridor lit with golden sconces. Guests were already arriving for the pre-wedding dinner downstairs. I could hear the hum of conversation, the clink of glasses. Nathan's laughter rang out above the rest. Of course it did. I moved toward the hallway leading to the dining area. On the wall hung framed photos of happy couples who had married at Hillcrest Lodge. Perfect smiles, perfect families. I wondered if they ever had to scrub their names clean before anyone would invest in them. Lily spotted me and walked over, glass of wine in hand. "You sure you're up for this?" I nodded. "You look different," she said softly. "I feel different." She touched my arm gently. "Then let's go in together." I let her lead me down the stairs. Whatever tomorrow held, I wasn't walking in like a ghost anymore. The room was already glowing with warm lights, crystal centerpieces catching the reflections of chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a movie set. Laughter bounced across the long banquet hall, champagne glasses clinked, and servers moved like shadows between the tightly packed tables. Nathan stood by the main table with Reagan tucked neatly under his arm, grinning as if he had just won something. Maybe he had. Maybe he always did. I stayed back, Lily still beside me, scanning the room for a moment of calm that never came. Faces I hadn't seen in years passed me with half smiles and nods. Some stopped to say hello, others brushed by like I didn't exist. Then Harriet appeared, hair perfectly curled, wearing a satin blue dress that matched the ribbons on the centerpieces. "Oh, good," she said, looking me up and down. "You cleaned up nicely." She didn't wait for a response. Her eyes flitted to my tie. "But next time go with navy. It flatters your frame better." Before I could answer, she leaned in slightly, her perfume heavy. "Tonight I need you to stay composed. Tomorrow you'll understand your place." She gave me a polite smile and moved on. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Nathan took the mic a few minutes later, thanking the guests, throwing out some jokes, praising the wedding planner, who ironically was me. But he never said my name. "Now it's my brother's turn," he announced. People turned toward me. There was polite applause. My chest tightened, but I stood and walked slowly to the mic. I cleared my throat and looked out at the sea of well-dressed people, smiling politely, expecting a light toast, something brief. Nathan and we were not the same kind of kids. He was the golden one, confident, loud. I was quieter, more of a listener. But growing up with him meant learning how to make space even when none was offered. I paused, letting the silence stretch. A few people shifted in their chairs. Still, I've always admired his ability to take center stage. I mean, look at tonight. It's perfect. Beautiful bride, beautiful setting, and every detail exactly the way he wanted. There were a few chuckles. Nathan raised his glass, a bit too smug. "So I just want to say, congratulations. I hope this next chapter is filled with the same certainty and ease that's followed you this far." I set the mic down before the clapping even started, walked back to my seat. Lily reached for my hand under the table. "You were brave," she whispered. I didn't feel brave. I felt exposed. As I sat, I caught sight of my mother Teresa sitting 2 tables away. Her dress was simple, her face unreadable. But in that moment, her eyes met mine, sought with something unspoken. Sadness, pride, maybe both. The applause died down. People returned to their meals, conversations picked up again. But I sat still. Caleb raised his glass from across the room, subtle. Supportive. I nodded back. Then Nathan leaned toward me as he passed by to greet guests. "You almost made that about you, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I turned to the mirrored wall behind me, catching my own reflection again. My eyes looked older in the golden light, tired but present. Lily squeezed my hand harder. "You're not alone." I nodded barely and smiled, not out of joy, but out of defiance. A sharp, bitter smile, the kind that holds its ground. A hush settled over the banquet hall, that strange kind of stillness that falls when something unspoken shifts the air. Plates were being cleared. Someone laughed too loudly in the corner. I was still at the table, Lily beside me, her fingers resting gently on my arm. Then Robert stood. He didn't use the mic. He didn't need it. His voice carried like a blade slicing through silk. "You think you're clever?" I turned slowly. His face was red not with alcohol but something older, deeper. His jaw clenched, eyes locked on me. "That toast. That was about you, not your brother. It always is." The room was still. Conversations died mid-sentence. Chairs scraped quietly. Someone at a far table gasped. Caleb straightened from across the room. "Dad, sit down." Nathan muttered, clearly uncomfortable. Robert ignored him. "All these years, Elias. All these chances to make something of yourself, and here you are, hijacking your brother's wedding to make some pathetic stand?" My chest tightened. I didn't say anything. What could I say that would matter? Robert took 2 steps closer. The clack of his shoes on the wood echoed with finality. "You think this day is about you? It never was." He raised his hand. Time froze. His palm hovered in the air between us, suspended by years of resentment, misunderstanding, and everything neither of us had ever said aloud. It was not just anger. It was disappointment sharpened into violence. My eyes didn't leave his. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't a scared teenager waiting to flinch. I stood my ground. People around us held their breath. The band stopped mid-tune. Silverware clattered as a server dropped a tray. Someone let out a sharp gasp, cutting through the silence like glass. The moment stretched until it felt surreal. Then Mason stepped forward, fast, steady. He caught Robert's wrist midair with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "No, not here, not now." His voice was quiet but carried the weight of something final. Robert blinked. His body recoiled slightly as though Mason's touch jolted him back into the present. He looked around and saw the faces watching. A woman at the nearest table pulled her daughter into her lap protectively. 2 groomsmen exchanged shocked looks. Teresa had risen halfway from her chair, one hand to her chest. "What the hell are you doing?" Mason hissed under his breath, leaning closer. Robert pulled his hand back slowly. For a moment his eyes darted across the room like he was searching for an escape hatch. Gasps erupted. A few guests stood. Someone whispered too loudly. Did he really try to hit him? Nathan walked over, eyes wide, trying to mask the rising panic with a forced grin. "It's okay, folks. Just a little family misunderstanding." But no one laughed. No one relaxed. Caleb had moved closer now, standing protectively near Teresa, who looked like she might collapse. Lily's hand never left my arm. I could feel her shaking slightly. I stayed rooted in place, my spine rigid, my breath shallow. Robert finally straightened his tie, adjusted his cuff with exaggerated precision, and turned to the crowd. "Please continue your meals, everything's fine." His voice was too calm, too rehearsed, but everything wasn't fine. Not anymore. He walked back to his seat, slow, dignified, pretending nothing had happened. Harriet leaned in and whispered something sharp into his ear. Her face twisted in restrained fury. Nathan followed behind. Jaw clenched, tight cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Mason stayed where he was, body angled slightly in front of mine. As if ready for anything, no one spoke to me. No one needed to. I could feel the shift in the room. That invisible line that had always separated me from the rest of the family had now been drawn in bold, permanent ink, and I had no intention of stepping back over it. Someone tapped the mic. A high-pitched feedback squeal cut the tension. Heads turned. It was Mason. His hand was steady, but his voice wavered. "I didn't want to do this here. I prayed I wouldn't have to. But I'm not going to watch this lie play out any longer." Robert had frozen mid-step halfway to his seat. Harriet's mouth parted in a warning, but she stayed silent. This isn't just about a father losing his temper. This is about a secret that's poisoned this family for decades. I stood frozen. So did half the room. Nathan furrowed his brow, confused, one hand hovering over Reagan's shoulder. Mason inhaled sharply, and then said it. Nathan is Robert's son, but not Teresa's. A collective gasp swallowed the air. My mother didn't move. Her body seemed to lock in place. Mason kept going. Years ago, Robert had an affair. He had a son, and he brought that child into this family while hiding the truth from the woman who raised us both. He protected Nathan not just because he loved him, but because he felt guilty. Guilty that his mistake could destroy everything. Robert's face drained of color. Nathan's lips parted. A beat. Then he laughed, unsure. This isn't funny, Mason. It's not a joke. It's the reason you were always protected, why Elias was always diminished, why the company, the praise, the respect, they all flowed one way. Harriet stood then, voice sharp. This is not the time. Mason turned to her. You helped keep it hidden. You pushed Teresa out. You let her believe she had failed as a mother. Teresa finally stood, her face pale, her eyes locked on Robert. Is it true? Robert didn't answer. His silence confirmed everything. Tears welled in Teresa's eyes, but she didn't cry. She looked at Nathan. He stood rooted, his hands twitching. You knew, she whispered. Nathan shook his head slowly. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But his voice was thin, too thin. Mason stepped away from the mic. The silence was suffocating. I turned to Lily. Her eyes glistened. She tried to smile, but it cracked. The room was no longer a wedding. It was a battlefield of revelations. And for the first time, it wasn't me at the center. It was them. I exhaled, looked around. Every mask had fallen. Finally, the truth had exploded. Chairs scraped, glasses clinked as hands fumbled. The carefully curated ambiance shattered in seconds. People murmured, some stood, others reached for their coats. The hum of unease rolled through the room like static. Nathan turned on his heel and stormed toward the back hallway. Reagan called his name, but he didn't stop. Harriet crumbled into her seat, her arms wrapping tightly around Robert's. She buried her face into his shoulder, sobbing. He didn't console her. He just stared blankly ahead, eyes hollow, face unreadable. Teresa stood like stone, then she turned slowly, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she walked out without a word. Caleb moved to follow her, but she raised a hand, halting him. She needed space. Lily leaned into me. Do you want to leave? I couldn't speak. My legs moved before my voice could catch up. I stepped forward, slow at first, then quicker as the tension sucked the oxygen from the room. People parted as I passed. Whispers filled the vacuum I left behind. I reached the doorway and stopped, glancing back. Mason stood near the mic, still hands on the podium, chest rising fast. He didn't look at me, but I felt him there. The once beautiful room, all gold light and white roses, now looked like a crime scene of broken traditions and spoiled memories. Nothing felt sacred anymore. I stepped into the hallway. Cool air greeted me. The corridor was mostly empty. A faint hum from the kitchen filtered through a closed door. Further down, exit signs glowed red against the muted cream walls. I kept walking. Each step echoed louder than it should have. My shoes tapped out a rhythm I couldn't slow. My pulse thudded in my ears. For the first time in hours, I was truly alone. Not invisible, not forgotten. Just alone. I passed the coat room, the guest book table, the framed engagement photos of Nathan and Reagan. I paused at one, Nathan's smile, too polished, too perfect. I wondered how much of his life he had lived pretending, or if maybe he was always just the recipient of secrets he never asked for. I found a bench beneath a flickering sconce and sat down. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and old wood polish. It was still. For a moment I just stared at my hands, trembling. Then I clasped them together. This wasn't how I thought the day would end, not with shouted truths and unspoken farewells. Not with my family scattered across corners of this place like broken china. Behind me, the muffled voices from the ballroom swelled and fell. A door opened. I didn't look. I needed stillness. I closed my eyes. Tried to trace back the years, the choices, the things left unsaid. I thought of my mother's sins, of Robert's contempt, of Harriet's controlling grip on our narrative, and of Nathan, caught in it all, center of the storm. Was it his fault? Maybe. Maybe not. But it didn't matter anymore. I opened my eyes. The hallway remained unchanged, but something inside me wasn't. I had stood in the center of a storm and survived. Now in this quiet place, I could begin to breathe again. 2 days later, I was back in Denver, sitting across from Caleb in his office that overlooked Civic Center Park. Outside, the city bustled beneath early fall leaves, but in here, the air felt heavy and tensional. Caleb pushed a thick manila folder across the desk. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled up, but his tone was razor sharp. This is what we found. The email, the header data, IP trace. It was routed through a burner account that was wiped clean 48 hours later. I opened it. The document inside was crisp, clinical, but my stomach churned with every line. The forged email bore my name, claimed I was canceling my engagement due to a mental health crisis, that I needed time away and was withdrawing from all active projects. It was short, less than 200 words, but it detonated a month's worth of work. My RSVP speaking slot at a major healthcare symposium was pulled without explanation. 2 investors backed out, a third froze disbursement, and no one called to check if it was true. That's what hit hardest. I leaned forward. Who would do this? Caleb shrugged. It's speculative right now, but the tone, the timing, it's personal, not random spam. This came from someone who knew you'd been climbing back. I ran a hand through my hair. Harriet. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, she's benefited from the narrative that Nathan is the next generation, that Robert's legacy is secure through him. I closed the folder. My hands were cold. She's also the only one with access to some of my personal contact lists. I shared wedding logistics through a family group chain. Caleb's eyes darkened. That's helpful. Digital access implies intent, and if we get a subpoena, we might find more. But even now, you've got a strong civil case. What are my options? Defamation, tortious interference, possibly fraud, depending on how far it went. We could also go the quiet route, demand a retraction, settle privately. I stared at him and let them get away with it. Caleb hesitated. The press can be messy. You'll need to decide what matters more, clearing your name publicly or keeping this from turning into a media circus. I looked out the window. The golden dome of the state capitol glinted in the distance. Somewhere down there, people were walking their dogs, grabbing coffee, planning weddings that wouldn't implode halfway through. I thought about what it had cost me already. The credibility, the hesitation in people's eyes, the apology emails laced with doubt. They tried to make me look unstable. They tried to disappear me. Caleb cleared his throat. You could let it go. I turned back to him. Let it go. I thought of every time I'd swallowed my pride, every passive-aggressive jab I'd ignored, every time I stood outside my own life watching others rewrite my story. No more. Let's file. Caleb gave a slow nod. I'll get the paperwork started. I stood, voice steady. Make it loud if it has to be. Just make it true. He extended his hand. I shook it. You sure? I smiled. Not bitter, not wounded, just done being quiet. Absolutely. No more silence. The next morning, I drove 2 hours south to a small town just outside of Colorado Springs. The GPS led me past faded barns and golden fields to a beige brick building surrounded by birch trees. It was the same assisted living facility where my grandmother Vera had spent her last years. A place she had also once volunteered to teach literacy decades ago. I hadn't been here in years, but somehow it felt like the place I needed to be. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and hand lotion. A young aide greeted me with a warm smile and directed me to the common area where half a dozen residents sat in a semicircle. A small dog waddled between walkers and a woman played piano softly in the corner. An older woman with snow-white hair looked up from her knitting. New volunteer. Not exactly. I'm Vera Carlton's grandson. The woman's eyes lit up. Vera, good heavens, that woman could teach you to read Shakespeare upside down. She made this place feel alive. Others chimed in with similar warmth. Stories about her flooded the room, about her love for storytelling, her patience, her firm but kind way of correcting pronunciation. I sat down beside one woman named Clara. Her hands were thin but steady as she turned the pages of a weathered book. "You look like you're carrying a lot, son," she said. I gave a soft laugh. That obvious, she reached over, took my hand, and held it without expectation. This world will do that to you, make you feel like you owe it something, like if you're not perfect, you're failing. I blinked hard. Her words landed heavier than I expected. What if you've been told your whole life you weren't enough? She looked me square in the eye. Then they were wrong. We sat in silence for a long while. The piano played a lullaby barely audible over the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Another woman joined us, then another. They asked no questions about my scandal, my lawsuit, or my family drama. Instead, they asked what I used to draw as a kid, whether I still had my dog, if I remembered the smell of pine during summer camp. Simple things, real things. Hours passed. I hadn't intended to stay long, but something in the rhythm of the place anchored me. These people had lived lifetimes, seen wars, buried loved ones, survived betrayals of their own. And still they smiled. Still they found joy. Before I left, Clara pulled me aside. Don't let them define you. The world, your family, even yourself. You hear me? I nodded. She added, stop walking with your head down. You've done enough of that. I hugged her tight. Driving back, I didn't turn on the radio. I rolled down the windows and let the air fill the silence. Something inside me had shifted. Not everything needed to be fought with fire. Some things needed to be healed with presence. And in that little room full of worn hands and open hearts, I had remembered who I was again. The idea came to me somewhere between Monument and Castle Rock. A charity event. Not grand, not performative. Just something simple that reflected what mattered. People, connection, dignity. 3 weeks later, with Lily's help and Mason's tireless coordination, we organized a community day at Meadow Creek, the same assisted living home where I'd visited Clara and the others. We booked a quartet of local musicians, arranged for fresh pastries from a nearby bakery, and collected books, scarves, and hand lotions to gift the residents. The sun was kind that day, warm without being harsh. A soft breeze rustled the birch leaves as volunteers in navy aprons helped wheel residents onto the garden patio. Lily wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and was practically glowing as she handed out lemonade. Mason worked the grill, flipping burgers with comical seriousness. I moved between tables, greeting people, helping with seating, laughing more than I had in months. Clara waved at me from a shady bench. "Told you," she said. "That light was still in you." One gentleman in a cap covered in military pins tugged at my sleeve. "You planning to run for mayor or something, son?" I grinned, just trying to make up for lost time. The laughter, the soft jazz, the scent of lilac from the centerpieces, it all felt unreal in its goodness. No tension, no judgments, no roles to perform. There was a moment standing at the edge of the courtyard where I just paused, watched, listened. A chorus of voices singing along to an old Sinatra tune. Two residents dancing slowly, barely swaying. A volunteer braiding a woman's long white hair while telling a story about her daughter's dog. This was what mattered. Lily joined me and slipped her hand into mine. "You're different here," she said quietly. "How so?" "You're not waiting for approval. You're not bracing for the next blow. You're just here." I looked down at her. She was right. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. Not to Robert, not to Harriet, not even to Nathan. It was about choosing who I wanted to be. I spotted a little girl from one of the volunteer families handing out cookies. She reminded me of myself at 6, visiting Grandma Vera with homemade cards. Clara caught my eye again, raised her glass in a toast. I returned it with a smile. The afternoon passed in a golden blur. Stories were shared, jokes traded. At one point, someone pulled out an old Polaroid camera and the sound of clicking shutters echoed through the courtyard. Near the end, as guests began to leave, I checked my watch. There was no urgency, just awareness. A new life didn't always begin with fireworks. Sometimes it started with warm-bred old songs and a gentle reminder that we are never too broken to be of use. I looked at Lily, then at Mason, who was handing out leftover desserts with a grin. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was what healing actually looked like. A week had passed since the event at Meadow Creek, and I found myself returning to quiet routines. The mornings were crisp, touched with the scent of maple, and the evenings folded into soft silences. One such morning, nestled between bills and flyers, was a cream-colored envelope with no return address. Nathan's handwriting was unmistakable. I hadn't seen it in years, not since we shared textbooks and study schedules in college. The letter was simple. No frills, no theatrics. "Elias, I owe you more than an apology." He wrote about the shame that followed him after the wedding, how the truth hit like a flood, drowning the illusion he had held on to. He admitted to having known about the email that ruined my engagement, even if he hadn't been the one to send it. Worse, he said, was his silence, his complicity. He had sensed Dad's favoritism for years, but buried it under the need to be accepted. I read the letter twice, then a third time. Each word carved a deeper groove in my memory. He ended with, "I understand if forgiveness is too far, but I want to start something real, whatever you'll allow." I set the letter down and stared out the window for a long time. The world didn't shift, the sky didn't crack, but something inside me moved. That night, I sat at my desk while Lily dozed on the couch. Her breathing was slow, peaceful. The dog lay at her feet, twitching in a dream. I pulled a blank sheet of paper toward me. My handwriting came slower than I expected. "Dear Nathan, thank you for the courage to write and for the honesty in your words." I paused, drew in a breath. "Let it out. I want you to understand something. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not the brother you used to know either. Life has changed me. The pain, the rejection, the silence, it all carved out a different version of me. And I like who I'm becoming. You don't owe me repair. You owe yourself truth. If you really want to live honestly, start by questioning the parts of yourself you hid to make Dad proud. Start by asking why you stayed silent. As for us, I don't need to resume the past. I'm building something new, something mine. I'm rooting for your growth, but I'm not offering a bridge back to what was. Let's meet someday on new ground. I folded the letter, slept on it, reread it in the morning, then sealed it without edits. At the post office, I watched the envelope disappear into the chute and felt a surprising calm. Not satisfaction, not closure, just room. Back at home, I brewed coffee and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a proposal I had set aside for weeks. I began to type. The words flowed easy. It was a community-based platform for senior storytelling, inspired by Meadow Creek, built on the belief that stories, especially forgotten ones, deserved a stage. Caleb had offered to help register the nonprofit. Lily had ideas for outreach. Mason promised to connect us with local volunteers. For once, I wasn't writing to escape. I was writing to build. That afternoon, while walking past the park, I saw two kids flying kites. Their laughter rang out like freedom. An elderly couple sat on a bench nearby, fingers intertwined. I paused, let it all soak in. There was no audience, no judgment, just life unfolding at its pace. I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because I no longer needed it to be. The weight was gone, and I had finally made room for a life that fit me. A life not built in reaction to pain, but shaped by the healing that followed. The future, I realized, was not just ahead, it was already here. Sunlight stretched across the wooden floors as I stirred my coffee, watching dust particles float like gentle reminders that time, no matter how it bruises, also heals. The days since I sent that letter to Nathan had passed without drama or reply, but I didn't need one. The silence this time was mine, and it was powerful. Work began to pick up slowly. The storytelling platform caught the attention of a few community centers in Oregon, and even a podcast producer who wanted to collaborate. Caleb filed the paperwork for nonprofit status, and Mason helped us land a pilot program in Portland. It was nothing grand, not yet, but it was mine. Lily and I started spending more weekends visiting retirement homes, not out of obligation, but joy. We ran small sessions where residents shared old love stories, war memories, or simply recipes passed down generations. They lit up. We lit up. And just like that, something new had rooted itself in our lives, something that asked for presence more than perfection. At one session, a former jazz singer in her 90s hummed a tune while Lily strummed quietly on a borrowed guitar. The moment froze in my mind, this gentle image of two generations holding space for each other. It was nothing like the applause-driven chaos I had grown up around. It was real. One morning, I opened my email and found a message from the Oregon Arts Council. They had reviewed our application and wanted to fund our first traveling exhibit, a mobile storytelling booth visiting rural towns across the state. I leaned back, stunned, then smiled. All those years spent trying to prove I was worthy to people who barely looked up from their champagne flutes. And here in this space I had built with pain, honesty, and the hands of people who chose me worth, had finally become something internal. I thought about Dad, about Harriet, even Nathan, the weight of their expectations and the emotional debts I used to carry. But I didn't carry them anymore. I had learned to let go without bitterness, to grow without seeking applause. Later that week, Lily handed me a photo she had framed. It was from the wedding day before the storm, before the mic drop. I was holding the ceremony schedule, lost in thought, while Mason adjusted my tie. Behind us, Caleb raised an eyebrow, already sensing something was off. It wasn't a perfect shot. I looked uncertain, a little out of place, but when I looked at it now, I saw something else too. A man who stayed, stood, and then walked away with his head high. We hung the photo in my office above the desk where I now spent my mornings writing proposals and emails, sipping coffee from the mug Vera once gave me. I had started again. Not from scratch, but from truth. For those listening now, if you've ever stood on the sidelines of someone else's celebration and felt invisible, if you've been humiliated, dismissed, or silenced, I see you. More than that, I am you. And if you're still standing, still loving, still building despite it all, then know this, you are not alone. And this is not the end. This is your beginning. Let's keep walking together.